started wanting to have kids from the moment we got married. I don't handle pregnancies very nicely. Some people are really good at being pregnant and carrying on the pregnancies. You know, they glow, they don't have morning sickness. I had the works, I had everything. And my husband hated seeing me in pain. So what I would do, and my husband is going to hear this for the first time, don't judge me.
Exclusive on the Road to Motherhood podcast. Exclusive. Okay.
But I would go for antenatal alone because I don't want witnesses. So I would go to the hospital
To eat
buy
bread.
bread.
Okay.
Buy a full loaf of bread. Babe, don't judge me. Buy 2 bottles of Coke. I would sit in my car and I would eat that whole loaf of bread, drink the Coke.
The 2 Cokes. So.
2. That's my antenatal.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. For medical advisory and care, please consult your healthcare provider. Welcome to the Road to Motherhood podcast, where we talk about all things becoming a mom. I'm super excited for this episode. We have a dear friend in the studio. We've just become friends, so it's so good to have you here, Jasmine Harrison. So welcome, Jasmine.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So good to have you here. So please introduce yourself to the audience, your name, what you do, and how many kids you have.
Okay, my name is Jasmine Harrison. Some people know me as Winifred. I have a lot of names circulating. I'm a mother of 3, and I'm a beautician, or I do hair more, but I'm in general beauty services in Nigeria.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And how many kids, not how many kids, but how old are your kids?
Okay, my first is 10. He'll be turning, no, he's actually not 10. What? I'm still stuck in his 10. I remember his 10th birthday. I think that's why I'm stuck there. But he's turning 12 this year.
12.
And then my second is turning 10 this year. And then the third, the baby of the house, is turning 4 in April.
Okay, so you have 12,
10,
4.
4.
Okay, and it's 2 boys and 1 girl.
2 boys and a girl.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
So we always kick off the podcast talking about the beginning of the matter when it comes to motherhood, and that's the conception phase.
Yeah.
So when it came time to conceive, what was the plan for your husband and yourself? Did you think, okay, once we get married, we want to start having kids immediately? Or did you say, let's take some time, let's get to know ourselves a little bit more, let's relax, let's settle, and then begin after? So what was that like for you?
Okay, so for us, it was a little bit different from both parties because my husband was very ready to start having children. He wanted to have children early. And, getting married at the time he did, he had been married before, or he lost his wife. So I was, the next, the second wife he married after his first wife that passed. And he wanted kids. He always wanted kids. He wanted to grow up with his kids. He didn't want to be an old man taking care of toddlers. So that was his perspective. My perspective was, when we get married, maybe we'll wait like 1-2 years and then we would start having kids. So it had to do with seeing him around children.
Okay.
So when I saw him around kids, he never pressured me like, okay, let's start having kids now. But I knew his mindset about having kids early. So when I see him playing with kids, I'm like, we could have that. So I started wanting to have kids from the moment we got married. In fact, I think I wanted it more than him. I showed it more than
he showed it.
Yes, he showed it. I remember he keeps referring to this most of the time that, just after marriage, I'm already laying hands on my stomach and begging God for pregnancies, And that was not the plan. That was not who I was before I got married. But I think love changes us. When you see the person you love want something and you know that you can give it to the person, then you just try to work along with that. So conception wasn't difficult. Before I searched, I became pregnant, but it wasn't the plan. The plan was to wait at first for me. For him, he didn't care. He wanted kids as early as possible, but there was no pressure. There was no pressure on his part at all.
Okay, so you had kids within a year after you got married?
Yes.
So you had your first child?
Yes, I had my first child on our first anniversary.
Okay.
Yes. By our first anniversary, I had my son. My son was just a baby. He was like a month or so.
By your first wedding anniversary?
Yes. Because he was born in October and my anniversary is in November. So it was about a month or two.
Okay. And then, so I see that there's about 2 years gap between your first and second.
Yes.
And then about a 6-year gap between your second
yes,
and third.
Yes.
So how was it having your second child also and your third child? Were those all planned? Did you plan them all at the time that they came, or were there like any surprise pregnancies?
No. There was absolutely no. Okay, so I must mention that I had 4 conceptions, okay, but 3 births. Okay, so from the first one, we had our son, Ken, at exactly almost a year after we got married. And then after him, I went in for family planning immediately because I knew that I was going to, I'm pretty textbook biologically. So whatever the textbook says is almost my case all the time. So I knew that as soon as I stopped breastfeeding, the tendency to conceive again was going to be there. And because I was going through all the postpartum, everything, it was not going to be an option for me. But I also knew I didn't want to wait too long. So we got the IUD put in, and we waited for about a year plus, and then we tried again. So by the time my son was turning 2, yes, 2, yeah? I just had my second daughter.
Okay.
Yes, and then we waited. We were done.
Okay, after your first son.
After my first son and then my daughter.
You had both planned to be done at that time?
Yes, we were okay. We had a boy, we had a girl.
Okay.
And I'm not the best carrier, I would say. I don't handle pregnancies very nicely. Some people are really good at being pregnant and carrying on the pregnancies. They glow. They don't have morning sickness. I had the works. I had everything. The only thing that I didn't have is the skin thing and the nose thing. So if you see, when you look at me from my head to about here, I look the same.
Okay.
Until, in fact, for my son, my body never changed until when he was about 8 months. I started having a little bump at about 6-7 months. In fact, it was a funny story. My husband and I, when we wanted to start taking bump pictures, because I didn't have one, we would fill my stomach up with cloth. Just so
for your maternity pictures?
No, not the maternity pictures, but
those general,
those general, updating pictures. This is what I would look like.
Okay.
But I'm not looking like that. So let me just, so we'll do that. We'll laugh at ourselves and keep going. But at about 7 months, the bump appeared out of nowhere.
Okay. With full force?
Yes, with full force. And then, I had him. And for him, it was a very big struggle, the morning sickness, the throwing up, but not the skin.
But not facially?
No, not facially.
Your skin was intact?
My skin was intact.
Okay.
Then my second came, my daughter helped me glow. I had the mother glow. My skin was intact. I had energy, for the better part of the pregnancy. I still had morning sickness, but it was manageable. You know, I would salivate a lot, all the nausea, you know, and everything, but I found ways to control it. I would either drink soda water, club soda, or
that worked for you?
Yes, club sodas worked for me.
Okay, good to note. Okay.
Club sodas worked for me. Then agbaluma or the cherry.
Udara?
Yes, udara,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
It worked for me too. So it changes. So as it changes, I'm changing whatever I'm taking, but it helped. So but for her, I glowed. I looked, I didn't gain too much weight. I looked nice.
Okay. So your skin was popping again?
Yes.
Second time around?
Yes.
Okay.
My skin was popping again. And then after her, we were done, as I said. But, you know, people talking, our mentors reminding us that God said we should come and multiply and fill the earth.
Divine reminder.
Yes, you know, there could be more. Let's just have one more. Let's just have one more. And my husband was done because of the birth experiences, which I would share.
Okay.
You know, the birth experiences were really, really difficult. So, and my husband hated seeing me in pain. So he felt, okay, God has blessed us with one. Even that one was more than enough for me. Now he's given 2. Let's call it a day.
Let's wrap up.
Yes. We have duplicated ourselves, a boy and a girl.
A boy and a girl.
Let's be done, you know. But pressures, and I knew that he would not be under as much pressure as me, because it's usually in our culture, is the woman that has
like
the final say. That's the impression. Yeah. Like if they don't have another child, it's either...
It's because of the woman.
Yes, it's the woman. Yeah. So I had to intervene. I begged him. I talked to his friends, a friend, particularly his kingdom friend, who I spoke to, and, you know, he just said one thing. He said, you know, a child will only bring a blessing. A child will never, ever bring a curse. So whatever it is, it's just the process that could be difficult.
That can be tough, possibly.
Yes, but the child itself would never bring a curse, especially when the child is from God. So I took that word and I told my husband, and he was like, okay.
And he agreed?
Yes. We tried again, and then I had a terrible miscarriage.
Sorry.
That almost took my life. Terrible, terrible miscarriage. So after that, my husband was like,
really done.
Done. Because this is what I was afraid of. I didn't want anything to happen to you. And this miscarriage, this child, almost took your life. So it took another wheel of convincing after a while, and me recovering before I took in again for the last baby. But we never had to search. There was never a contention on conception. Yes, God was so faithful. Anytime we tried, I was able to conceive.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for also mentioning that you had experienced a miscarriage that was tough. I know that a lot of women can relate to that and can hear that and say, okay, wow. And you still had enough faith, had enough stamina to keep going after that. And you still conceived another child and delivered and gave birth to another child. So thank you so much for sharing that. I would like to go into that a little bit. So how was your mindset after you went through the miscarriage in preparing to now go back to try and conceive again? Like, how long did it take you to heal?
Okay, so the miscarriage came about, let me start from there, from when I went to the hospital at about 24 weeks or so. And prior to this, you know, the antenatals, I think it's every 4 weeks or so.
Yeah, something like that.
And prior to this, baby was fine, everything was progressing. And then I went to the hospital and they couldn't detect any heartbeat.
Okay.
So they told me it's not viable. I went back, and in faith, I kept quiet about it and said I was going to pray and my child was going to come back to life. But when I did check, again, there was nothing. So then I told my husband about it. And my husband is a man of faith, but he's also a man of the spirit, and he's matter of fact kind of person. You know, okay, do you want us to trust God for this child to come back? And at that point, it was already a week after I found out.
A week after?
Yes. And I knew my faith wasn't there anymore. Because on my own, I felt I had enough faith. And so at that point, my faith had crashed, I should think. So he said, you know, we can still try again. So let's just, and you know, you waited a very long time before you conceived again. So it's kind of expected that your body is trying to get used to the process of conceiving again. So let's just, you know, trust God for another conception. So I went to the hospital and they said they needed to do a D&C.
Okay.
And I have a problem with that mentally. The surgical operation of the quote and unquote abortion. So I said no, I didn't want to have that invasive procedure. So they said, okay, the alternative is to have the drug, you know, put in, and then you would miscarry at home. And then you can come back for a follow-up. So they did that in the hospital, expected it to just go smoothly. And I went home and bled.
At home?
At home. And the blood just, it was a flood. And my husband came in and he was confused. He was virtually packing my blood into the bath room, you know, because it was everywhere. And that was not what they said would happen.
That's not what they said. So you weren't expecting that. Yeah.
I was weeping. Yeah. He was trying to stay, you know, calm. Yes. And after a while, he felt, okay, we called the hospital and they said sometimes it happens like that. We should just be calm. It will stop. But I bled throughout the night. Non-stop.
Throughout the night?
Throughout the night.
So that's several hours?
Yes. And bear in mind, I was pregnant. So I was having morning sickness prior to this. And I wasn't eating properly. So I was already malnourished, dehydrated.
In addition?
In addition to this. Yeah. So I started becoming very lethargic. I was confused, dizzy. So my husband just scooped me up, put me in the car, took me to the hospital. And so they checked me and said, oh, everything is fine. Okay. You know, they put everything in context and said, okay, she'll be fine, just take her back home. But I wasn't. I lost control of my bowels. So I was stooling on myself. I kept bleeding non-stop. And that went on for days.
Days?
Days.
And they didn't mention that could happen?
No.
Okay.
And my husband was trusting. And I mentioned that he lost his wife in the hospital.
First wife,
yes, his first wife in the hospital. So he already had that association of hospital with so he
death.
Didn't want a situation where he would have to, let's just stay and watch and wait. And in that waiting, I was virtually dying. And at a point, I told him, we need to go to the hospital. If not, I am going. Because at that time, I was already hearing spirits. I was virtually hearing spirits. I was not here anymore. So he took me to the hospital, and when we got to the hospital, they pressed my palm, and they looked at me and said, you are virtually dying. They had to do a lot of evacuation, and then they needed blood.
For a blood transfusion?
Yes, for a blood transfusion. For the first time in my life, I had to get a blood transfusion. And his family, they are amazing people. And they have a lot of blood in this family. So they came in their numbers donating blood, and they kept on pumping me with blood, and the recovery was slow. I bled for about 6 more months continually.
Months?
Yes. We had even a trip programmed for, I think, 2 weeks after the miscarriage, the major miscarriage, which we could not get our money back on. So he encouraged me, let's just go. On that trip, I would, as soon as we're walking out, I'm bleeding. It was like the woman with the issue of blood. Bleeding out. So we have to run back to the hotel, go change, come back. I would sit in the cab and soak the cab. It was
that intense.
It was terrible.
For 6 months?
For 6 months. And it teetered out for a while and then stopped. So it was a situation of my life is in danger, so this is not an option anymore. But I just knew that was not going to be my last child.
So I just want to pause there, because it's that knowing I want to expand upon a bit. Because would you call that faith in a word that you got from God? Because somebody else might be hearing this and saying, if you're going through that kind of an experience that's so intense, traumatic, painful, how did you just know that wasn't going to be your last child? How did you just know that wasn't going to be your last time around?
I don't know. I can't explain it.
Okay.
It's just an inner knowing.
An inner knowing.
I just knew that this is not my last.
Okay.
Everything else pointed to the fact that this has to be the last. You understand? I think maybe that's what faith is, without all the biblical explanations, without all the English.
Without all the English. The practical sense of it.
Just
a knowing that you know that you know without doubt.
That this is not the end. But my husband was done.
I can imagine.
He was done.
Because he was done at number 2.
Yes.
Before this experience.
Yes.
So I can imagine how done he was now.
He was very done.
Or at that time. Yeah.
Yes, he was very done. He said, no, your life is so much more important to me. So eventually, I think it was about 2 years later, we tried again. So that's why the gap between
the second child.
Yes, the second and the last baby.
Last born.
Yes. I don't like saying third.
Yeah, because
I like saying last because
born.
he is the last.
Yeah.
There is not going to be another.
Okay, there's no room for more. You're like, that's okay. This is our last born.
This is the
Emphasis on last.
Yes, this is the last. Okay. So that's why the gap is there.
It's about 6 years.
Yes, it's about 6 years. It's about 6 years.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Being honest and vulnerable about your story, all parts of it, both the sweeter parts and the tougher parts, I really appreciate it. And I'm convinced that our audience watching also appreciates it too.
You're
so
welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate you for that. And thank God that we have your last child to also celebrate.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let's move into more about the pregnancy experiences. I want to just make sure we touch a bit more on that. So you mentioned that for your pregnancies, your skin was usually popping, glowing. You didn't always show early, a little bit later on. Now, in addition to morning sickness, which might have happened more than in the morning, was there anything else that stood out to you that might have surprised you about your pregnancy experience?
Oh.
Anything you weren't expecting?
Oh, yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Oh, my hair stank.
Oh, really?
Oh, my hair smelled so bad.
Okay, so not just that you weren't washing it.
No. And I don't know if it was hormones or it was my sense of smell.
Ah, okay. But to you, it smelled so bad.
It smelled so terrible. So I wouldn't want to touch my hair.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to scratch. I would always be in a turban because of the smell
of your hair.
Of my hair.
Okay. Interesting.
was
I haven't heard
another
that one.
thing. That was.
Okay.
Then I was repulsed by food. That might have been the nausea.
Okay. So it was
There were
tough to
only
eat.
a few things I could eat, like eggs. I would always eat eggs. It changed with each pregnancy, though. For my first son, there were eggs, virtually just white food.
Okay, like white rice.
White rice.
White bread?
Oh, bread. Bread came in fact, I think bread was one of the biggest culprits of his size.
Okay, he was a big baby.
Oh, he was a big
first
baby.
Okay.
And my mother-in-law would say, don't eat bread, though. The baby will grow too big. So what I would do, and my husband is going to hear this for the first time. Don't judge me.
Exclusive on the Ruth Motherhood podcast. Exclusive. Okay.
But I would go for antenatal alone. So he would tell me, let the driver take you. And I'm like, no, I want to drive. I want to exercise. I want to drive. And because I don't want witnesses. So I would go to the hospital
To eat
buy
bread.
bread.
Okay.
Buy a full loaf of bread. Babe, don't judge me. Buy 2 bottles of Coke.
Okay.
But
2
that
bottles.
was about 7-8 months when the eating was better.
Okay.
So it was like reward. I've not been eating, so at least
Let's
now.
make up for it.
Yes. Carrying this child. I'm tried now. So I would turn off my phone so that he doesn't call while I'm chewing, because he will ask, what are you eating?
And you don't want to lie.
And I don't want to lie. He's a man of God. He will find out.
So you just said, you know what?
So I would sit in my car and I would eat that whole loaf of bread, drink the Coke.
The 2 Cokes.
2.
2 Cokes.
Clean my mouth. That's my antenatal. Sometimes the nurses will be passing my car and they'll just be looking at me like, continue.
I know.
So the baby grew exponentially in the last 2 months.
Last 2 months.
Like his weight at 6 months was mind-boggling for the doctor at 8 months. Like, what happened?
What happened? It's just 2 months. Not knowing that you've been finishing bread and Coke in the car.
I've been eating bread and Coke.
When you're going for antenatal.
Antenatal. And then I'll go home and then you'll be like, okay, babe, what should we buy for you? What do you want to eat? And I'm full.
Thinking that you haven't eaten.
The nausea, I don't want to eat, is bread. Bread is in my stomach. I'm telling you.
I'm sure he'll be like, so that's what was happening to you.
Yes. So his own, it was bread. My daughter, I think that girl just gave me a lot of rest because I could eat almost anything.
That's the second time around.
Yes, I could eat almost anything after the first trimester, you know. But the last was the hardest of my life.
Okay, so your last child.
Was the
that
hardest
pregnancy was
for
the
the pregnancy period.
Okay.
I don't know if, I think age contributed to it.
Okay.
Then the duration of the wait.
Okay.
The distance between the pregnancies.
Okay, between the pregnancies.
I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't eat anything. I was virtually eating eggs every day.
Okay.
Chewing ice.
Okay, and that helped?
Yes.
Okay.
I chewed ice for about 2 months.
Okay.
So, you know, my husband was worried at the time, but then the doctor said, it's fine since she's hydrating. You know, it's at least she's getting water that way, because I couldn't drink water normally.
Regularly.
Yes.
Okay.
And then after a while, the soda water started working. Okay. After a while, the soda water would stop. And then I have to pick udara or something else. So, but I never really ate.
In your 3rd pregnancy?
Yes. I hated meat. Couldn't have meat. Couldn't eat rice. Couldn't drink tea. And you know I love tea. I couldn't drink tea.
Wow.
Throughout the whole pregnancy. I would throw up at least twice every day.
Wow.
At least. Sometimes even more. So he was the hardest. And then all the other symptoms were there. Couldn't hold anything in. Hair smelled like any terrible thing that you could think about.
So everything just culminated together.
Yes.
In your last
And then
pregnancy.
the last pregnancy, that's when my skin gave out.
Okay. So the skin that had been your badge.
That had been my
your badge of honor.
It's just that my nose stayed true to its nature.
Wow.
But my skin, I started having a lot of breakouts,
Okay.
a little rash. My neck turned a little dark. And then normally my stomach will go dark too. Yeah. Yes.
So no wonder you said that was my last child.
No, it's last. Forever.
Last.
Till Jesus returns.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now let's talk about the childbirth experiences. How were they? What stands out to you in terms of how it was the first time around versus the next 2 times around?
Okay, I will try to compile it in the most logical way possible. But for the first and the second, I was induced on both occasions.
Okay.
They said my body was not recognizing the labor process or the contractions. So they had to induce me for the first. For my first son, I was sent into the hospital about 8 p.m. in the evening for the induction to start. And I was in terrible labor without an epidural or any
Once
kind
they
of medical
induced you.
care. Yes.
Once they induced you.
As soon as the induction started, it was like an upward trajectory. It just kept on going.
Of pain and contraction.
Pain and contractions. There was no rest period. I was in constant pain. My mom was there. I couldn't eat. I got to the point that I was vomiting bile because there was nothing in my stomach.
Nothing in your system.
And then the matron came in and my mom mentioned, they gave my daughter, this induction, and she didn't eat before then. And she's been throwing up. And then the matron's eyes enlarged and my mom knew there was trouble. So at about 10 a.m. in the morning, they wheeled me to the delivery room.
Okay. And you came in 8 p.m.
8 p.m.
the night before?
Yes.
Okay.
I had been laboring throughout the night.
Okay.
So, and in my labor, I was distracting myself with hitting myself.
To relieve the pain
To
somehow.
relieve
It was
the
helping
pain
you.
somehow. And by the time I got into, there was blunt force trauma here. So my whole thigh had gone black.
Okay. From
From that pain.
force.
That's to show you how intense
the pain was.
the pain was.
Yeah.
I didn't even feel what was on my thigh. And my husband went with me. He just kept on praying. All I was hearing was his prayer in my ear. And we got into the labor room, and then they connected me to a lot of drip. They said the drip was supposed to help me push because I was done. That's why when you shared your story with me, I was just smiling because it was almost a mirror. I was screaming. My mom had to go outside the hospital gate. She went to the main gate because she was so traumatized by the noise she was hearing coming from me. And the matron just said, shout anyhow you want to shout. Whatever you need to do for this child to come out, just do it. Because she knew they had made a mistake somewhere. To have induced me and know I had not eaten and I was throwing up, I was stooling and nobody came to my aid, nobody put in a drip. I was already tired. You know? So by the time it was time for me to push, my son was already exhausted too. His heartbeat had gone. And my husband was just in my ear, coaching me, push. When it was time to push, he would squeeze my hand. I scratched him. I did everything that you could see on any Nigerian movie. And when my baby rolled out, he didn't come out. He virtually rolled out of me. There was no crying. He was gone.
He was gone at the time.
He was gone. And I was waiting, because that's what they said. When the baby comes out, he's supposed to cry.
As we've been told.
As we've been told.
That it's supposed to sometimes be immediate.
Yes.
Which these days we're learning that it's not always the case. Okay.
I waited, and I kept on asking my husband, what's going on? Why isn't he crying? My husband said, he's fine. That's what he kept on saying. He is fine. He is fine. Don't worry. Our son is fine. He didn't go to check him. He just stood with me. He was praying and saying, he is fine. And they tried to resuscitate. They tried everything. And after like about 5 minutes, 5 grueling minutes, or maybe a little less, that cry, that muzzled cry, it wasn't loud enough.
But
so
it came out.
They couldn't give him to me.
Okay.
Because he was in sepsis. He had swallowed so much of the fluid in the stomach. And he had already defecated in the stomach. So he had, microbial sepsis. So they had to wheel him into ICU. I didn't see my son for 3 days.
You didn't see him for 3 days?
I didn't see him. I didn't touch him for 3 days.
That had to be hard.
I went home like a woman that had lost a child. Waiting and trusting. And it was on the second day when I was weeping. They would allow my husband go near him, but not me, for some unknown reason. They would just tell me to pump and send milk to him. And then on the second day I was praying, and I saw, in the spirit, because I had already lost faith, I saw angels surrounding his crib in the hospital. And it was amazing because I had not seen his crib in the hospital. But when I went back on the third day when they told me I could come to breastfeed him, it was exactly what I saw. And they were surrounding him, and they were smiling. So I knew he was okay. So it was on the second day, all my sorrow, all my fear just ended. I was no more afraid that I would lose him. So he was the toughest. It was the toughest birth process. For my daughter, they also induced me, but I was in the States.
Okay, the US?
Yes, I was in the US. And then they gave me an epidural. I slept.
The gift of the epidural.
The gift of the epidural. I slept like a baby, and they woke me up. It's time to push. And I pushed my baby out. Although she had some complications, she was really small. She was not feeding properly, so we had to, induce early, for her to come out. But she came out a very small baby, but she could suckle, so she didn't go into ICU as they thought. They already had everything prepared. And I told them, and my husband had said it, my child is not going to ICU. You're not going to get my money. No, she's going to breathe on her own. She's going to be able to latch, and this girl worked for her milk. As soon as she came out, she was desperate for milk. She suckled throughout the whole night, and I started producing milk the second day.
She said, "You people will not put me in
She
any
said,
ICU.
no.
Give me.
I mean, after a week, on the next visit, when I brought her, the doctor said, "Is this the same baby?" Because she had tripled her size. To the point that she had colic, so her stomach was distended. They were like, "She's sucking your blood."
She's sucking for life.
How could she be this big? For her, that was, Then for my third child, for him, I had a talk with God at that point that, this is my last. And I want to be able to experience a normal delivery process. I don't want to be induced.
Okay.
I want to know what it feels like to. And God directed me to a doctor that was such a spiritual man. He didn't want any intervention, any medical intervention, unless it was thoroughly required. He never even did the cervical exam on me. Because
he never
it was
did the cervical exam.
because it was something I told him I was very uncomfortable with. It was something I never liked. I never
because they were painful.
The pain.
The one I remember.
So he said he didn't want to propel any memory of pain, and let's just trust God. Unless if my body or my medical examination starts showing an indication that we need to do any of that, he was not going to do anything. I told him I reacted to malaria drugs. He never gave me anti-malaria drugs as a pregnant woman, which was a staple.
Yeah, because I remember I took that.
Yeah.
They gave me.
He never gave it to me. He said, if you look like you're sick, come to the hospital. So I and my husband and this doctor walked in faith through with this child. And the day the child was to come, 2 days to his EDD, I said, Guy, they are not inducing me for you. So I took my mom to ShopRite. I walked around ShopRite.
To naturally
Yes,
get induced.
I took long walks. My mom had to sit down at a point. I kept going, telling her I was looking for baby things. No, I was exercising. And as soon as I got home, I could start feeling that zinging feeling on my legs. So I already knew something was happening. I took my bath and went to bed. And at about 11 o'clock, I started having like the Braxton Hicks.
Okay, the fake contraction.
Yes. I was like, is this just fake contractions? But they started expanding. So after like 20 minutes, it started drawing closer. Started drawing until it became 5 minutes. So I called my doctor. And you can call that man any time of the night. Dr. Rupe, such a blessing.
Is he still in Abuja? Is he in Abuja?
Yeah, I think he is. Well, he's not with the hospital I was in before.
Wow.
He's more like a lecturing doctor, so he moves around.
He sounds like a godsend.
He was God sent. He was God sent. And so I called him and he was like, Madam, how far? I said, sir, the thing I'm feeling, he said, okay, just pack your things and go to the hospital now. So I told my husband packed my bags up, already packed, got into the car, got people, my girls were already in the house with the kids, so I told them, just take care, we'll call you guys tomorrow. We got to the hospital, told us that that the contractions weren't strong enough. Baby wouldn't come until at about 3 o'clock the next day.
Okay.
No, at about 9 a.m. the next day. Yes,
and
in the morning.
And you got in what
I
time?
got in at about 12 midnight.
12 midnight, okay.
So they said, let's just watch. Dr. Rupe called them. He came, actually, and he said, nobody should do anything. No induction, no oxytocin. He doesn't want to see anything connected to me. They should just send me to my husband, got a very pretty room. You know, we were relaxed, watching TV, and then things started to take a drastic turn.
On its own.
On its
naturally.
own. Oh, that pain. Oh, that pain. But it was so different. So it will relieve me for a while. You see, that's why God is so perfect. You cannot replicate what God does. Medicine tries, but they cannot replicate God. Because what the induction does, it makes it so consistent.
So consistent, like there's no room to breathe. Really.
There is no room to breathe. But for this one, I would have some breathing room. My husband would rub my back. And sorry. And then it would take off again. And at a point when it was getting too intense, that was about 3 a.m., my husband said, no, this is not sounding like it's going to be 9 a.m. anymore. You guys should come and check.
Around 3 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay.
And as they just checked, I was already about 9 centimeters
dilated.
Yes. They have to rush me. In fact, the lady said, you would have given birth on this bed. So they rushed me into the delivery room. 5-10 minutes. I pushed my husband, praying in my ear again. And I pushed my son out, and he came out with the loudest octave. And the night before, when I was praying, the Holy Spirit told me, the shout of the King will be heard in your house. And I was attributing it to God, the Lion of Judah. That means God is going to. But when they came to my room to give my, they usually would teach you how to bath your baby.
Yeah.
They didn't know I was a veteran. So they came and they were cleaning him up, showing me how to wash. And I was just there dutifully watching. So you just give him the bath because right now I'm not going to bath
just
him.
finish it up.
Yes. And she said, this your boy has a voice. First of all, he's the only boy that was born today.
In the hospital?
Yes. Among all there were about 12 girls born that same night. And he had the loudest octave. Because they usually measure the voice vibrations. He said he had the loudest voice. And then that prophecy replayed in my head.
The voice of...
Yes. The voice of the king will be heard in your house today. And I just broke down crying. And I said, Lord, whatever this child is for, he would fulfill. That I make it my duty to ensure that he would fulfill, because he came against all odds. There was absolutely no reason for us to still try. But every time my husband looks at it, even when he's running around and playing, my husband said, this one had to come. He just says, this one just had to come.
And I love that you say your husband says that.
Yes.
Because at one point, he was also adamant that you guys stopped.
No, he was.
So the fact that he has that knowing too now, that this one had to come.
Yes, yes. And even in the whole birthing process, the conception process, my husband, that's the word he kept on saying, this one had to come.
This one had to come.
He fought against all odds. He fought against every single thing and said, my voice is going to be heard in this house. And when you see him, his personality shows you
it matches.
That I had to be here. I had to be here,
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I just love the doctor you also highlighted in this last experience you had. Because I think the medical staff plays a huge role in how you also experience your childbirth. So I just love that you had a spirit-filled, and let's be clear, Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Because there are different spirits. So a Holy Spirit.
Can you say that again, please?
A Holy Spirit-filled doctor that walked with you in faith, with your husband, with you. I'm so happy that you had that experience.
It was a blessing.
I'm so happy. And I love that you also had the experience of, I think you said, was it the midwife or the nurse that had told you, scream however you need to scream? Yes. Because I also know of experiences where people were told by their midwives, come on, shut up.
Muzzled.
Shut up, stop talking, like you're making noise, you're weakening yourself. But yours actually told you, whatever you have to do at this point, just do it.
Yes.
Let us make sure your baby comes out.
And that feeling of being accepted, however you are, plays a very big role. That I'm not being judged.
That you're being accepted. And it's a vulnerable time. So when do you need that the most? In this type of a vulnerable time. You need to know that they are all there rooting for you.
Yes.
Even if you're not showing up perfectly.
Yes.
As one might prefer.
Yes.
Even though what is a perfect way of showing up?
What is? Really?
But thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so I want to now move into the part that sometimes gets overlooked. Because it's easy to overlook it. Because many times we think you've had the baby, the work is finished. Postpartum. How were your postpartum experiences?
I had postpartum depression on every single one.
I like that you are not even wasting time to say it. You're like, I had postpartum depression for every single one. Okay, please help us understand.
And I'm born again, spirit-filled, tongue-talking, fire-breathing. I had postpartum depression on every single child. My first child, my husband walked in on me in the bathroom weeping because my hair was falling out before I got natural.
Okay, before you went natural.
My hair was falling out and I had this little person that intruded on my life that I don't know.
And you're
he
still
scared me. And I was alone. My mom came for a month. She wasn't strong enough to stay too long. And I was left alone. And I had never tended to a child before then. I used to say, I have such little hands, God, how do I hold this child? Every time we go to visit a family friend, even before we got married, my husband will always take the child because he knew I was afraid of carrying children, babies especially. I just felt they were just too tender. They could bend, they could break, they could fall off my hands. But now I have to give this baby a bath. I have to figure out why he's crying. And my first was extremely sensitive, and he's still a sensitive child. He's the most sensitive in the whole house. Extremely intelligent, a wonderful child, but extremely sensitive
too.
So he senses what you feel. He's an empath, so much so that if you are not okay, he would start crying.
Okay.
And you'll be wondering what is wrong. He sensed what is in the room. So even till now, I have to control his environment because it will determine what he will produce. And this child is there. I have to tend to the child. It's my first.
Your first.
I'm clueless. I was depressed. And then the second, I was thinking, oh, now, you're a veteran, you know what's up.
Yeah.
But it wasn't even as bad because I had help. My sister-in-law came. She's a delightful, lovely woman. She tended to that baby. She would bath her every morning. She was with me in the States. And then my husband came over and joined us. So it was a little better. Recovery was a little quicker. I fainted only once. I have fainting spells. When I feel too much pressure, I tend to faint. So for her, it was just once. For my third.
Your last.
My last. Recovery was long, hard. I had high blood pressure, and then I gained more weight than I usually would.
Okay.
This time came with all the works.
So
my skin changed. My stomach, my body was so black after giving birth. I couldn't fit into my clothes, even the clothes I took to the hospital. It's like I gained weight overnight. I don't know how they can explain that scientifically. But the pants I took, like the trousers I took, I tried it on. And now I've given birth and
it's
I
not
can't get in. So I don't know whether my body was swelling because of the high blood pressure or something.
Okay, so you had high blood pressure this time around.
Yes, I had high blood pressure. I was anemic.
Okay.
Terribly anemic.
Okay.
I had sleeping issues. And then they tell you need to sleep to get your blood pressure under check. How can I do that when I'm breastfeeding and tending to a child? So my husband will say, let's pump into a bottle. Maybe we'll try at night if I can feed him. But I know that baby won't take the bottle. None of my children, unfortunately for me, took the bottle.
So it was direct supply.
It had to be direct. And I would do the exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months.
Wow.
I didn't even give water.
Wow.
So I was latched to that baby for 6 whole months. Well, it paid off, but still, the sacrifice was a lot.
Wow.
So with him, then my feet were swollen. Never had that experience before. I would press it and it would just stay there.
Okay.
Indentations in my flesh.
So everything was a shock to you?
Everything.
Everything was just shocking.
It was so new. I was not recovering quickly and it upset me. So it made the depression a little more.
Because this was your last child.
This is my last child.
You've done this before.
I've done this before.
It's never been like this.
Why is it so difficult? We don't want to talk about the relationship between husband and wife after giving birth. It's strained. And then we're trying to fix that, and then you're trying to fix your child, you're trying to fix yourself. It was just a lot. And it almost seemed like it was not going to end. Like, that's what I think your viewers need to know. You could be in a place right now that it looks like it's not going to end, but it will.
It will.
It doesn't look like it will, but it will. There's always an end to it, but you are not going to see it in that place, in that seat that you're in, because you are inside it. Eventually, it will tether out, and then it will begin to make sense. You would heal, you would recover. It might be slow, but it will happen. But it still depends on you. Because I remember at the time, my husband had to call me in to check. Like, babe, you really need to recover. Whatever you need to do. If the child needs to stay somewhere and cry for you to sleep, let him stay somewhere and cry so that you can get 5 to 10 minutes of sleep. So that you can be a human being. If this boy needs to starve for 30 minutes for you to get food to eat.
Or to eat, yeah.
Because I wasn't feeding myself. I wasn't taking care of myself. And that's the kind of mom I am. I'm a little too giving. So I pour everything and then I'm not filling the cup where I am pouring from. Pouring. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm then pouring air.
You're pouring out of nothing for yourself.
Pouring out of nothing. So the recovery was really, really difficult. So I would say the easiest of them was my daughter. I'm sure she'll be pleased to hear this because she feels like the princess of the house anyway. She's going to rub it in their face. If she hears it, I'm going to hide this recording from her.
She's going to be like, you see, Mommy said that my postpartum experience was the easiest.
And that's how her head is going to move.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think you touched on so many key things in postpartum. I like one of the first things you said. You said, you are a Bible-believing, tongue-speaking, born-again woman, and you still experienced postpartum depression. Because I think sometimes people might think that if you are somebody of faith, or if you're somebody who believes in God and walks with God, that certain things will never touch you. And in some cases, certain things will never touch you.
Yes.
But we shouldn't also judge negatively when certain things touch some people. Because at the end of the day, we're humans. And as much as we are in faith, we are also having a human experience.
Yes.
And some of these experiences feel so heavy.
Yes.
And so overwhelming.
Yes.
And the good news is that in the same Bible that we're all supposed to be reading, it chronicles several people that had very interesting human experiences.
Oh, yes.
That were also high in faith.
Yes.
And also people that loved God and walked with God.
Yes.
So I think that should encourage anybody who might be beating themselves down. That, oh Lord, I'm not, what kind of a person am I? What kind of a believer am I? Don't beat yourself down. Be encouraged that the same way Jasmine rose out again because of the God that backs her.
Yes.
Is the same way you too can rise again.
Yes.
So thank you for what you said when you also mentioned that if anybody is in the thick of something right now, they should know that it doesn't last forever.
True.
It doesn't last forever. You will come out of it. But like Jasmine said, you have a part to play.
Yes.
You have to decide that you must come out of that.
Yes.
That you can't live in what is beating you down.
It will keep
forever.
going.
And I think sometimes, like, life is so interesting because sometimes we can get so focused on the burden, or what seems like the burden, and the weight of raising our children, right?
Yes.
That we forget that children are a blessing from the Lord.
God.
And everything else that we're dealing with, whether it is anxiety, depression, exhaustion, marital issues, everything else, we can come out of that. We can navigate through that. But it doesn't change the fact that the children themselves are a blessing from the Lord.
Yes.
And I think sometimes, at least in this day and age, I see a lot of messaging around almost like children are a problem, right? Or like they are just a burden.
A burden.
And I think it is so incorrect.
So.
It's so incorrect. They are a blessing. the thing is that they have also come to stretch us.
Yes, yes,
To literally stretch us into growth.
Yes.
Our own spiritual growth, our own emotional growth, our own growth in all areas. And sometimes growth is not comfortable. They call it growing pains for a reason.
Yes, yes, yes.
There is the painful part of growth. It doesn't mean the growth is bad. It just means that you had to navigate both the sweet side of it and the painful side of it. But don't now blame that the cause of your growth, right? Don't blame your child and make them out to be burdens. So I love that you're sharing this so that people understand that you can have the blessing of children, you can have the faith of God,
yes,
and at the same time you can go through tough experiences.
They're trials of our faith.
Yeah. It doesn't change that the children are the blessing.
No.
And it doesn't change that God is good and you have faith.
Yes.
It's trials.
Yes.
And like you said, it doesn't last forever.
Yes, yes.
So thank you for sharing that. I believe many women will be encouraged by that and can shift their perspective if they've had the wrong one about their experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a few more questions to ask.
Okay.
So when it comes to your mother and how you view her now, after having children of your own, is there anything different in how you see her, in how you appreciate her?
Not really.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. Because growing up, she was like our mother and father at the same time. She was the epitome of strength and sacrifice. Our dad wasn't with us for a while. She provided, she nurtured, she gisted. She was friend, nurturer, provider, everything in one. So we knew, or I know, let me talk just for myself now. I knew the level of sacrifice she was already making. I think what might maybe change is perspective, because now things are more in perspective. Then I was thinking from the angle of the receiver. But now having children of my own and being able to give them everything that they need, sometimes I wonder, what if I cannot provide? And she went through days like that, where we had to go hungry. And I know it broke her. Because she would say, I can stay hungry. What about my children? My children have to eat. And she sold all the clothes in her cupboard until she only had underwear. And she would tie a wrapper on it. She just had one wrapper and one, what we used to call shimi.
Shimi?
Yeah. That was all she had tied to her name. Because she would sell her clothes to feed us, you know, then in Kaduna. And she was strong. She stayed because of us. She would have chosen to run away, go and live her life somewhere else, but she stayed. I guess because she felt she had us, so we were her responsibility. But now I see it from the mother's perspective, where not just I love them, but I want to protect them.
Yeah.
What if I can't? You know, so it didn't. My respect for her never changed. It had always been constant. My love for her never changed. It had always been constant. But it's just perspective-wise, I think, that is the difference.
Perspective. I love that. I love that you said your respect for her never changed. You've always had respect for her. It's beautiful to hear. So thank you so much, Jasmine. I've loved getting to know more about your motherhood story. I mean, this is actually why I really love the podcast as well. People that you see, right, you might just see them and have an assumption about how their life is or how their journey is into motherhood or other things. But then to sit with you here and learn about everything you've experienced, the ups, the downs, and how you have flourished through it, even in the midst of when it was tough. You still come out flourishing. Like, looking at you, I couldn't have guessed some of what you experienced. Thank you so much again, Jasmine, for coming on the podcast and sharing your story.
You're welcome.
This is actually part of the reason I love this podcast so much. Because to be able to sit here with you and hear all the aspects of your story, the ups, the downs, the seeming good, the seeming bad, it's encouraging. to me. And I feel like I'm even more connected to you.
Yeah.
As a fellow mother, as a fellow woman. And that's something that I wouldn't have been able to get if we didn't get to talk like this.
True.
So I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I think it's so easy to see people and make assumptions and make judgments. Just seeing you before now, seeing the image of you as I saw you, I would never have guessed some of the things you've been through. I would never. So this is valuable to me that we've shared this experience together. So thank you so much.
Thank you too. I had a great time.
Thank you. I'm happy. Okay, so we're coming into the last portion of the episode, and we call it the rapid fire Q&A.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to ask you very quick questions.
Okay.
And you'll give me very quick answers.
I shall try.
As much as you can. As quickly as you can.
Okay.
Okay, so let me actually put them up on my phone.
Okay.
My trusted phone that is hiding behind here. Okay, so are you ready? Are you pumped?
Okay.
Okay, so question number 1, texting or talking?
Texting, definitely.
We're in the same boat. Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Beach vacation or hiking trip?
Oh, beach.
Okay.
Any day.
I was going to say we couldn't travel together because if it was hiking trip. Then favorite childhood movie?
Chitty Bang Bang.
I've not seen that one.
You haven't? You should.
I haven't.
It's delightful.
Who is
it
in
was in the class of Sound of Music. Yeah.
Okay, I would like it because I love
Bang
Sound
Bang
of Music.
Yeah.
Okay. A sound you love?
Rain.
I like the sound of rain too. One thing that always makes you laugh?
My kids.
One thing you do for fun and self-care?
Drink tea.
Tea. Tea with anything inside? Anything to?
Ginger, lemon.
Okay. One thing you love about being a mom?
One thing I would love about being a mom.
That you currently love about being a mom?
Watching them grow. Having front seats to the growing process. It's amazing.
I love that. And then one word that describes motherhood to you?
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice. One thing you wish you had been told about motherhood before becoming a mother?
That it won't be easy.
That it wouldn't be easy. Okay. And then one thing you want your children to say about you when they grow up?
I can tell her anything.
I can tell her anything. And I'm trusting that they will say just that.
I hope so.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, everybody, for watching this episode. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to Jasmine. I'm so inspired and encouraged by her story, and I hope you are too. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button. Please share it with women in your network, in your family, in your schools, in your workplaces. You never know who will be blessed by this episode. You never know who it will impact for the better and who it will help on their own motherhood journey. So I'm grateful. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Until then.